Hello and welcome to today's video where we'll continue our chat about services. So this is part 2 out of 3. And today we'll talk about background services run in own thread. And of course, we're going to try and explain everything the easy way as we always do. So let me tell you what we've done in the previous video. As you can see, the previous video was about blocking the user interface, and we had a service that was running on the main thread or on the UI thread, and we've done some tasks on that thread just so as to block the user interface and see what happens. That video contains a very detailed explanation on how to create a service, how to start a service, the 4 methods that you need to override in a service, and so on. I will not go into many details. If you need to find out about those, and if you need to learn about those, please check the previous video. You can find the link in the description below. In this current video, we'll talk about background service run in own thread. So we're building on the previous app and we're adding some new functionalities. And in the next video, we'll talk about locally bound services, but this is going to be a different story in the future video. So this is the user interface, and it looks exactly like the one that we have developed in the previous app. In the previous video, it has a button that you click so you can see the user interface is responding, and every time you click on this button, there will be a counter incremented and displayed here next to the other text. You have this text view that will show the status of the service, whether the service is started or stopped, and 2 buttons that will allow you to start and obviously to stop the service. So let's go to the Android Studio and see exactly how the code looks like and how it executes. I will open Android Studio, and as you can see, I already have a project loaded, and this is the application that was built in the previous video. So we have part 1 of this video, which shows you how to build this app and how to start and stop a service in the main thread. What you are looking at right now is part 2 of the video, where we will take the code executed in the main thread and we move it in a separate thread. So the service will run some code in a separate thread. This way the user interface will not be blocked. But before we go to that part, I will just briefly explain what we have at this point on the screen. For those of you who want more details, please check part 1 of this video. So what you can see right now, the user interface has 3 buttons and the text view. When you click on the first button, there will be a counter incremented and displayed here next to the other text on the button. So it will say, click to test user interface 1, 2, 3, 4, as many times as you have pressed the button. Then you have this text view that will show the status or the current status of the service, if the service is started or stopped. And then you have the 2 buttons that will actually command the service to start and to stop. That's all you have on the user interface, and that's all you need. Moving to the main activity. Over here, you have this part with some variables, the text view, and one of the buttons. This is the test user interface button, the counting button. We need to declare it as such and to find it by iView, just like we do with the text view, because we want to change its text. So for the text view, you can say set text, as you can see here. And just the same you can do for the button, because the button is also a view. So you can set the same, you can use the same method, the set text method, and you can change its content, whatever is displayed on the button, just like you would do in a text view. So this is what you'd actually do in the method associated with the test user interface button. This is the method. Then you have 2 more methods for the buttons to start and to stop the service. In this case, what you do, you start by changing the status. You will say service started or service stopped. And then you create an intent. The intent will take into account the context of this package, and it will indicate the class to be executed. So this is my service class, and it contains the code that is executed by the service. You have the class here, and we will go to it in a moment. You use the start service call. This is to start the service, and the stop service to stop it, because every time you start a service, if it's just a regular started service, you need to make sure you can stop it, either by stop service or by stop self. If it's a bounded service, then the moment all the components unbound to the service, this is where the service will stop automatically. But that's a different story. Let's go to see the code. and you have this my service extends service class. We have this tag because we need at different points in the program to display something in the log cat. Then you have 4 methods. You have the onCreate. This is executed the first time. You can see it as initializing whatever needs to be initialized before you actually start to perform the main code in the service. This is contained in the onStart command method. You have it here. And in our case, it just counts to 10 and freezes or sleeps the thread. In this case, it's still the main thread, but we will move it in a separate thread, so we don't freeze the main one. And then you have the last 2 methods, onDestroy and onTaskRemove. And this is responsible for destroying the service, as the name suggests. And onTaskRemove, we'll call the stopSelf method, which will bring us to the onDestroy method, because this is when we swipe away the application from the screen, and we want, instead of leaving the service to execute in the background, we want to stop it as well. This is why we added the stopSelf call over here. So this is what we have at this time with our application. What we want to do is to move this part of the code in a separate thread. So for this, let's create a runnable. I will just write the code and then I will explain it. I've just created a new runnable. You will have this part of the code being generated automatically, the one with the override of the run method. Then I just copy paste this for loop inside the run method of the runnable. And then I've created a new thread and I've passed this runnable to the thread to be executed. And I said start thread. The problem is that it will start to count 1 to 10. However, when we stop the service, this will continue running. Let me just show you what I mean. The application has loaded. So let me just show you by opening this tab. And I can click to test the user interface. So the interface is responding. Then I can press start service. The service is started and you can see the counting here. This happens in the background because right now, I'll just leave it finish and then I'll start it again. So you can see, I start the service again. And then I can still interact with the user interface. It's not blocked. Okay, now let's see what happens if I stop the service. We go here to onDestroy. So we're actually going through this method. Now, if I start the service and right away I want to stop it, as you can see, the application continues to count. Okay, so let's have a look back to see what actually happened over there. So we went to the onCreate method, we started the onStart command, 1, 2, 3, 4, the code is executed, and then I pressed stop. When I pressed stop service, we were sent to the onDestroy method over here. However, the thread was still running over here, the thread which has been created, this one, the thread, and kept counting. The problem is that even though we can still interact with the user interface, we cannot stop the thread that is started. So let's see how we can do that. I've closed the emulator. And then we'll do a very basic approach. Let me just go here and I'll declare a Boolean variable and I'll say volatile Boolean. And I'll say stop serve. And this will be false because we don't want to stop the service in the beginning. When we press the button to stop the service, we will be executing this part over here, this method. So we come here inside and we say stop serve. This will become true because we want to stop the service. Inside this loop over here, every time we increment the counter, we will check to see if we have to stop the service or not. So we'll say if stop serve, if this one will be true, what we need to do, we just need to stop the thread. So we'll just say return. This will exit the thread. And one more thing that I will do, let's say before starting the thread, let me just say the stop serve will be false, in the sense that just before we start a new thread or the new execution of this part of the program, we don't want to stop it already. So this is why I've placed here as well. Okay, I will just save everything and I'll give it a go. Let's see how it executes now. Doing the same steps as before, let me just open the Run tab. We can test the user interface, it's running. We can start the service. It's on create, on start command, it's working. We can still interact with the app, very good. If I stop the service, okay, it will destroy the service. Let's repeat everything. We started the service and then we say stop. As you can see, it went to on destroy and then it stopped the thread as well. We'll start the service and then we can stop it at any time. It will not count anymore. So with this being said, I have shown you how to move some code from the main thread, I mean, from the service running on the main thread to the service running in a separate thread, dedicated thread. And I showed you how to stop it at any time when you choose to do so. You can always put some condition inside here, inside the code executed. So when something happens, it will call this stop self by itself. For example, you could say when I reaches 7 or whatever other condition, then you will stop the thread and stop the service. You can do it from within the service, from inside the service, or you can do it from outside by using this stop service. So I hope you have learned something new today. I hope this will be helpful for you. And until we meet again in the next video, keep practicing, keep learning. And if you have any questions, as always, you can leave a comment and I'll try my best to come back to reply as soon as possible. Until we meet next time, take care.